So you want to get hired as an internal recruiter. Well, this video is for you if you don't have experience as an internal recruiter, you have experience as a recruitment consultant in an agency, but you want to move in-house into an internal recruiter job, or you are an internal recruiter, but you want your next job to have a much higher salary. So you want to know how to level up your knowledge so that you can present that in an interview. And seeing as my recruitment coordinator video resulted in so many great hires and job offers and results, I've decided to follow up with this video for how to get a job as a recruiter. So let's get into it, and don't forget to like and subscribe. In terms of my history in recruitment, I've worked for a number of companies over the last 20 years, big and small and lots in between. I'm an interview coach and an HR recruitment specialist with over 10 years in-house and RPO recruitment, which I'll explain in this video. So there are three main types of recruitment jobs. These are a recruitment consultant, also known as an agency recruiter, an internal recruiter, and an RPO recruiter. Now, it's important to know the difference so that you know what type of recruitment job to target. The first on that list that I mentioned is an agency recruiter. The more common title for this is a recruitment consultant. If you are a recruitment consultant, you would be employed by a recruitment agency and you would work to find candidates for a variety of jobs for different companies or clients. Now, an agency recruiter's job is a sales job, but I'll do a separate video on a recruitment consultant and link it here when it's ready to explain that role in more detail. The second type of recruitment role is an internal recruiter, also known as an in-house recruiter, recruitment advisor, recruitment officer, resourcing specialist, recruitment specialist, talent acquisition specialist or manager, and many, many more titles. If you are looking for this role now, then add those titles to your search because it opens up a wider pool of jobs. Now, there are no sales in an internal recruiter job. It's not a sales job. As an internal recruiter, you would be employed by and exclusively recruiting for one company, and you would be based within HR, otherwise known as the Human Resources Department. And so your role may include HR generalist duties like inductions or payroll or other types of generalist work. The third type of recruitment job is an RPO recruiter, which can also go by embedded recruiter and on-site recruiter. RPO stands for Recruitment Process Outsourcing, and this is when a company decides to allocate or outsource part or all of its recruitment activity to an RPO company who will provide a team of recruiters employed by the RPO company to work inside that company with their hiring managers as though they are an internal recruitment team. So in your interview, it's helpful to demonstrate that you understand this and why an RPO might be necessary. So some reasons are that in some cases, it's more cost effective to outsource recruitment to an external company, or it might be more operationally efficient because that company might be working on a piece of work that's better managed by a team that is employed by an RPO company and managed by that company. For example, they might have an area of their business with super high volumes in recruitment where they have something like thousands of temp workers, a call center, for example. They might run events and need hundreds of thousands of event workers. So they outsource to a company who specializes in recruitment process outsourcing and can take care of all of that. You, as an RPO recruiter, will be employed and paid by the RPO company, but you would be working for the client in their offices with their managers like an internal recruiter. So this video is covering only the internal recruiter role. So now you know the titles and the different types of recruitment roles. These are the internal recruiter interview questions and answers that I'll cover in this video. What's your understanding of what an internal recruiter does? Why do you want to work as an internal recruiter? Tell me about your relevant experience. What are your key skills? What recruitment systems are you familiar with? What are the biggest challenges recruiters are facing at the moment? And how would you or have you handled these? Now, this is really important because the recruitment landscape has changed dramatically in the last few years. So you really want to demonstrate that you understand this and how it affects a recruiter's job. How would you recruit for a specific role? Talk me through that process from beginning to end. And I'll also cover internal recruitment phrases that you need to learn before your interview. Question 1 is, what's your understanding of what an internal recruiter does? So a simple answer to this is an internal recruiter is responsible for identifying and attracting applicants for open jobs within a company. The recruiter works closely with the hiring manager of the job to attract and hire the right candidates. Now, here are a few of the typical duties that are included in the day-to-day job of an internal recruiter. Staying in regular contact with the hiring manager and candidates throughout the recruiting process, also known as partnering, writing job descriptions and job adverts, shortlisting, also known as screening or reviewing CVs or resumes, interviewing, sourcing, advertising jobs on a variety of online platforms and avenues. So there are tons of duties within internal recruitment. This is just a handful of the most common. Now I'm going to cover internal recruitment phrases you need to learn before your interview. So the first is ATS. This stands for Applicant Tracking System. So let's say that you apply for a job online. Your CV or resume will go into this applicant tracking system, and this is where the hiring manager and internal recruiter can see your CV and where you've put down things like your notice period, desired salary. So just a quick note on the term CV. As you can probably tell from my accent, I live in England, and in the UK, we use the term CV, not resume. They're not exactly the same thing, but nowadays the terms are used interchangeably. So for ease and simplicity, I would say they're pretty much the same thing. The next phrase is KPI, also known as recruitment metrics. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and this is a target that you, as an internal recruiter, would work towards, and it's also a reflection and a measure of how you're performing in different areas of the recruitment process. So for example, if you had a 45-day time to hire KPI, that would mean that you have 45 days to fill your vacancy, and if you did that, you would be meeting that KPI, that indicator of your key performance in that area. Typical KPIs for internal recruiter are things like time to hire, cost per hire, so the average cost of each hire, interview to offer ratio. So if you had a 5-to-3 interview to offer KPI, that would mean that out of every 5 candidates you put forward, at least 3 should be good enough to be invited for interviews in order for you to be meeting that KPI. So if your interviewer asks you what your KPIs were or what KPIs are, then that's what they mean. Next is D&I, DEI, EDI, DE&I, or some other variation of those letters. This stands for diversity, equity or equality, and inclusion. So diversity is a huge focus for many companies at the moment, and it's a major focus in recruitment. Almost all companies seem to have a pledge, a plan, a strategy, or a promise to be more inclusive in these areas. Gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ+, age. According to data, workers over 40 are generally hired less, so there's also a focus on that. Candidates with varying disabilities, and many more areas. So you may be asked what exposure you've had to diversity, or if you're an experienced recruiter, you might be asked how you've hired inclusively, how you've made sure that the candidate pool was diverse, or how you made sure that your advert was inclusive. Here, talk about any experience that you've had hiring or working with learning establishments like universities that have flagship programs for any group that is a focus for diversity. Any projects or charities you've partnered with. There are many charities that create opportunities for young people with disabilities, for example, and they gladly work with companies or recruiters that can provide career opportunities. Now, in terms of inclusive advertising, there are tools such as gender decoders and other tools that ensure that your advert is open and attractive to as wide a range of genders and ages and other groups as possible. There are job boards and career sites in many countries that specialize in attracting candidates in any of those areas that I mentioned. Agencies. There are lots of agencies and more cropping up each day that specialize in focusing on groups that are underrepresented in the wider job market. So there are some really good examples there that you can use. If you're getting value from this so far, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. It has a huge impact on the channel. There are also other ways that you can support the channel in the description box below this video. Question 2 is, why do you want to work in an in-house recruiter role? This is one of the classic recruitment interview questions. Now, if you don't have experience and you're learning how to get into recruitment, Then you can talk about your transferable skills. So let's say that you interview at a company that is looking for an internal recruiter to manage recruitment assessment centres. So these are events where large groups of candidates are all assessed at the same time using various assessment methods. So you could talk about any experience that you've had with large-scale events, and even if you haven't done it at work, but you volunteered at a festival, for example, or a large event in your personal life, or you've done charitable work at an event, include that. You could say that part of the role really attracted me straight away in the advert. I saw it and I wanted to apply because I love the complexity of contributing or organising or managing large events, as I'm super organised. And then give a couple of examples of how you're organised, like tools or apps that you use to stay organised, or setting yourself strict timings, or anything that would be relevant to a large event. If you've got experience as an internal recruiter already and you want to move up, address the aspects of the role that are taking it up to the next level for you. So it might be that there's a coaching element in the role for other members of the team, or you might be responsible for budgets that you weren't responsible for in your previous role. The next question is, tell me about your relevant experience. If you have experience, structure your answer by starting with the relevant experience that are also critical skill sets for the role, and try to make your answer 2 minutes or less. Now, this is where your pre-interview prep is critical, and you can use any of these free guides to help you structure your answers and prepare. I'll link those free guides in the description box below this video. Okay, so if you don't have experience and you're answering this question, let's say that you're interviewing for a graduate recruiter role. So this is a recruiter that hires graduates or targets the graduate market. And you could talk about any exposure or interest that you've had in the graduate world or what excites you about it. So remember that if you don't have experience but you're in the interview, they already think that you can do the job. So dial up your enthusiasm and pick out key areas from the job description that excited you to apply in the first place. Some of the other typical experiences that are required in a recruitment role are things like volume recruitment. Volume recruitment is where you've worked on a high volume of vacancies at one time. For example, 400 call center operatives, 150 warehouse staff, 300 staff for large events. If you're being interviewed for a role that includes volume recruitment, then they're often looking for your understanding of how that works, the logistics, and your ability to understand the challenges that come with hiring in large volumes. Often for evergreen roles, which are roles that are always open or always being recruited for. If you don't have experience, then share any experience that you've had organising, coordinating, or helping with large events to show that you understand what it takes and some of the challenges that can go with it. Some other common recruitment specialisms that may come up in your interview are things like hiring for C-suite roles or executive search experience. An example of a C-suite role would be a CFO, a CEO, a CTO, a CCO, or any other director level position. Salaries can be anywhere from 150k to 600k upwards. Normally the person hiring for this would be looking for an experienced recruiter, potentially a junior recruiter that has worked in an executive search firm, which is basically a recruitment agency that specializes in hiring for those types of senior roles. Question 5 is, what are your key skills? There are a whole host of key skills that are related to in-house recruitment. These are some that are in demand right now, but don't include them all, of course. Pick out the ones that are relevant to the role that you're interviewing for or that you have relevant experience in. One major key skill in recruitment is direct sourcing or creative sourcing strategies. Now, having this skill can save companies a ton of money. So as I mentioned before, many companies use external recruitment agencies, but the main goal is still to have their internal recruiter fill as many of their roles as possible directly without agency help or having to pay agency costs. Direct sourcing is when you, as the internal recruiter, will find that candidate directly from the job market using a direct sourcing strategy. There are so many direct sourcing strategies. I'll cover a couple, but I can't cover them all in this video because it's a huge topic. So please search at least 2 or 3 creative sourcing strategies on Google before your interview. Another key skill is an understanding of LinkedIn. This is the classic tool for almost all recruiters. There are many ways to use LinkedIn for direct sourcing, but if the employer is looking for LinkedIn experience, it's likely that they are looking for someone who understands how to advertise a role on LinkedIn, how to engage and utilize additional LinkedIn tools. If you don't have experience, then do a couple of short courses on LinkedIn on how to optimize LinkedIn for recruiters. So the next key skill is job board mining, and this is utilizing job board databases to search for candidates. And often your employer will pay for access to candidates on that platform, and you'll only be able to search candidates that have given their consent to make their details visible to recruiters. Job board mining is another direct sourcing strategy. Boolean search. So you may hear Boolean often in recruitment, and in the interest of keeping this video under 25 minutes, I won't break it down here because it can get very complex, but please do look this up. If you don't know it, you'll need it in most types of recruitment. It's exceptionally powerful for direct sourcing, particularly on LinkedIn. So if you can find a free short course, then take it. What recruitment systems are you familiar with? They might also ask, what ATS systems have you used? So I explained earlier what an ATS is. Almost every recruiter uses an ATS. So you can answer this question comprehensively, even without experience. You just simply explain that you have a strong interest and are passionate about building a career within the in-house recruitment industry, which is true, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this video, and therefore you've done your research to look up the common systems utilized in recruitment, even though you haven't used them before, and you looked up the pros and cons of each, and this is what you found. Now, I tried to do a verbal breakdown of the pros and cons of each system in this video, but there simply wasn't time. I still want you to have the information though, so here is a lovely PowerPoint which you can pause and read if you're preparing for an interview. Now, in addition to this list, do some digging on the system that is used in the job you're interviewing for. They will normally say this in the job advert. So something like must have used Workday or something along those lines. So I cover most of these systems in detail in these two videos. So if you want my more detailed opinion on those systems, you can check those out. I will link both of those in the description box below this video. If this video is really helping you secure a job as a recruiter, you could just like and subscribe and comment with your question. That would really be helpful. Question 7 is, what are the biggest challenges recruiters are facing at the moment, and how have you or would you handle these? Another common recruitment interview question. So here they're testing your market knowledge and commercial acumen. This is your ability to understand external factors that affect the recruitment industry, such as Brexit, COVID, the Great Resignation, instability in other markets that might affect the recruitment world, and other economic factors and industry variables. Now, in your recruiter interview, it's unlikely that they will be looking for a detailed analysis, just an awareness that you're paying attention to the world. So if you're watching this in 2022, the challenges that I'm about to share will be relevant. And if not, then just do a couple of basic searches on Google and LinkedIn to find out what the current challenges are. A big, glaringly obvious challenge is the Great Resignation. The Great Resignation is a period of time starting in 2021 where lockdown rules after COVID started to ease up and people felt more comfortable leaving their jobs, as almost everyone stayed in their jobs throughout 2020. Then in 2021, about 4 million people in the US and 2 million in the UK resigned, which was double, or according to some sources, quadruple the rate of resignations. And recruiters went from being very worried in 2020 because there was no movement on the recruitment market to being stressed and overworked in 2021 with an unimaginable workload due to the sheer volume of roles that needed to be filled. So these are the kinds of things that you need to be aware of in your recruitment interview. So one other major challenge for recruiters as a result of the Great Resignation is candidate demand. So demand for high salaries and benefits up front from candidates that you used to have to work years in order to get in a job. And it's causing an unbalanced and unstable job market as more companies give candidates what they want and fight for the best talent. Too in-depth to explore more here, but do look it up. Brexit has been another big challenge. The United Kingdom has now departed from the European Union, and the most obvious impact in the recruitment world is that there is a lot more verification required if you're hiring workers outside of the UK. So it's a huge topic. So if you're going to get into a role that has international recruitment, then research this beforehand. In the UK, over the last few years, we've had a petrol shortage, which affected recruiters hiring in the HGV market. We've had IR35, a piece of legislation put in place to combat tax avoidance and affected any recruiter hiring contractors. GDPR affected how recruiters stored candidate data so that companies didn't get fined for data security breaches. So look at your local news where you're based and get a clear idea on what's affecting recruitment where you are. LinkedIn News, it's an easy place to start, and it's pretty much the online hub and marketplace for recruiters. So often the news articles are highly linked to recruitment, hiring, and the employment world. I know I haven't covered everything in recruitment. I know all the questions have not been answered here, so ask me your questions in the comments and I will try to answer as quickly as I can. So the next question is, how would you recruit for a specific role? Talk me through the recruitment process from beginning to end. If you don't have experience hiring, take note of this process so that you can talk through your understanding of it if you haven't done it yourself. You may want to watch this a few times to get a solid understanding of it before your interview. So an internal recruitment process always includes these 8 parts. Step 1 is approval. All roles go through internal approval. The salary and the headcount must be approved by the company as they will be paying that salary. So each manager can't just decide that they want an assistant and go out and get one. Otherwise, everyone, including me, would have a PA. Step 2 is a kickoff or briefing meeting. This is where you meet with the hiring manager and you agree the recruitment process. So this includes advertising strategy, where you'll advertise the role, sourcing strategy, what agencies you'll use, if any, the timelines, the interview panel and the types of interviews, competency, behavioural, situational, or another type, plus any related online or in-person assessments. Step 3 is agency engagement. You would engage with an agency if you're working with an agency on that role. And step 4 is sourcing. So finding that candidate. Did you use job boards? Did you use databases? Did you partner with local projects or charities? Did you promote the referral scheme to encourage existing employees to refer their friends or previous colleagues to apply for your role? Step 5 is shortlisting. This is where you go through all the applicants that come in and select those most suited to the job. Step 6 is interviews, normally between 1 and 3 stages, and will include the hiring manager and someone from HR as a minimum. In some roles, the recruiter will be the HR person that joins the interview. Step 7 is where you carry out rejections for unsuccessful candidates and offers for the successful candidates. Sometimes salary negotiation will also happen here, and then you can hopefully move into step 8, which is offer acceptance. Now, you may need to watch certain sections of this video a few times while you're preparing and practicing for your interview. It's timestamped so that you can go back and watch the relevant areas that you need. Ask me your questions in the comments, and very best of luck. I am rooting for you all. If you like this, then like and subscribe and comment. It's good for the YouTube algorithm, but it also helps me to know whether or not you like this video and if it was useful. See you in the next one.